Chapter 80. Relying on the 2 agility talismans that had been strengthened by the art of cultivating heaven and earth treasure, Yang Chen's speed almost doubled. The 2 of them weren't far from each other, so Yang Chen only needed one forceful step to arrive in front of Han Jianda. In Han Jianda's eyes, Yang Chen's figure blurred and then appeared next to him. With such speed, he was like a ghost. Han Jianda made a prompt decision to not use his trump card. However, just as this thought came to him, it was already too late. A mountain-like pressure enveloped him tightly. It was as if he had suddenly fallen into a sea of blood hell. The terrifying aura directly destroyed all of his will to resist. His entire body stiffened and he could no longer move. Even the immortals in the heavenly court felt afraid when Yang Chen released his killing intent to his heart's content, let alone Han Jianda, an ordinary disciple of the 6th layer of refining. In the eyes of the crowd, Han Jianda seemed to have become a fool. He only reached out to the side of his Qiankuan pouch, but he didn't make any further movements. "Spare me!" These 2 words could be said as long as his mouth moved, but at this moment, they were blocked in Han Jianda's throat. He couldn't shout them out even if he wanted to. He could only watch Yang Chen rush to his front. A feeling of despair filled Han Jianda's entire body. In Yang Chen's hand, an extremely valiant-looking long saber suddenly appeared. With a wave, the long saber slashed across Han Jianda's neck. Under the gaze of the crowd, Han Jianda's head flew up high and blood spurted all over the ground. The instigator, Yang Chen, had already returned to his original position. He didn't even look at Han Jianda. He only stared at the referee, waiting for him to announce the result. His actions were too simple. Rushing out, swinging the saber, sheathing the saber, retreating. It was so simple that no one could suspect that there was anything wrong with it. At this moment, Han Jianda's corpse fell limply to the ground. However, Yang Chen's body was as clean as if it had just been washed. There wasn't a single trace of blood on it. Shock, horror, disbelief, all kinds of expressions appeared on the faces of the onlookers. At this moment, everyone seemed to have lost the calmness that cultivators should have, the cultivation that would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. It was vividly displayed on everyone's faces. Who would have thought that a 2nd layer of qi refining and a 6th layer of qi refining, with a difference of 4 layers, would have such an unexpected result in a duel to the death? Countless people felt a chill in their hearts after witnessing this. It was as if the blade Yang Chen had used on Han Jianda's neck had landed on their heads. Before this, if Han Jianda had not jumped out, they might have been the next to mock and provoke Yang Chen. Countless people rejoiced in their hearts. Don't you know? Before fellow Yang became an apprentice, he was an executioner in the mortal world. This is what he said every time he killed someone. You must be careful, don't let fellow Yang say these words to you. An executioner can also cultivate? At least he killed many experts when he was at the 2nd layer of qi training. I just saw him kill a 6th layer qi training. Do you think he can cultivate? Young man, you did well. Su Qingxin laughed and praised Yang Chen and Gong Sunling when he saw them return to the Xianxia pavilion. With one slash, you shut up all the doubters. You saved yourself a lot of effort. I have high hopes for you. Thank you, Grandmaster. Yang Chen only bowed slightly in response to Su Qingxin's praise. What are you thanking me for? I didn't do anything. Su Qingxin waved his hand and said with a smile, You, on the other hand, have added a lot of color to my pure Yang Palace. In this way, you are only at the 2nd level of qi refining and should not have a flying magic tool. This bamboo eagle was a magic tool that I used to travel in the past, so I will reward it to you. As he said this, a black light flew straight to Yang Chen's side and hovered in front of him. Thank you, Grandmaster. Yang Chen reached out and grabbed the bamboo eagle. Someone gave him a pillow when he was dozing off. How considerate. Yang Chen only had a paper crane with a tracking formation. The bamboo eagle could solve his problem. Su Qingxin was very good at judging people's cultivation. This time, Yang Chen sincerely thanked him. Rest for a few days and wait for the stairway to heaven to open. Su Qingxin ordered with a smile. I also want to know which level of heaven stage you can reach. Chapter 81. The core part of the floating mountain gathering was when the new talents of various sects accepted the test of the stairway illusion, which was jokingly called the stairway to heaven. There was a mountain peak on the floating mountain. No one knew who carved 100 steps, which led from the foot of the mountain to the top. This mountain road full of steps was the stairway to heaven. On each step of the stairway to heaven, there was an extremely powerful psychedelic array set up by a senior expert, which only targeted the disciples in the chi refining stage. On this stairway to heaven, every step was a sharpening of one's heart. Therefore, sometimes the stairway to heaven was also called the path of self-examination. Opening the stairway to heaven required at least 10 Jindan stage grandmasters to work together, and it could only be opened at the same time every year. The opening time was limited, so the disciples who could go up the stairway to heaven were basically the disciples who were specially trained by the sect. Generally speaking, the higher the step on the stairway to heaven, the higher the achievement in the future. There were few exceptions. Each sect also attached great importance to the annual stairway to heaven. Each sect could only choose 2 outstanding disciples every year. Generally, those who were above the 5th level of chi refining stage were allowed to go out for trials. And this year, Chunyang Palace chose Gong Sunling and Yang Chen. In the previous life, Yang Chen's aptitude was ordinary, so he had no chance to participate in the stairway to heaven. Unexpectedly, in this life, he was still at the 2nd level of chi refining stage, and was sent here by the sect. Every year, 10 sects would be appointed to send 10 Jindan stage grandmasters to preside over the stairway to heaven. There was a ready-made array here, as long as these Jindan stage grandmasters input their spiritual power in the specified position. Of course, if those Jindan stage grandmasters were interested, they could even slightly increase the difficulty in the process of the postgraduate entrance examination. The duel of life and death, for the floating mountain gathering, was just an appetizer. Everyone's mind was still on the stairway to heaven. In the past, all the disciples who walked the stairway to heaven, as long as they reached the 20th level of heaven, were all vigorously cultivated by the sect. This was an opportunity for everyone, and everyone was ready to fight for a good result. Even if they couldn't make a name for themselves, the stairway to heaven was also known as the path of questioning heart. For all the disciples who were able to step on the stairway to heaven, it was a rare opportunity to hone themselves. As long as they were selected, all of them cherished this precious opportunity. Only Yang Chen did not think that he would be selected from the beginning to the end. On the day that the stairway to heaven was opened, almost all the observation spots around the stairway to heaven were occupied by disciples from various sections. All kinds of flying talisman weapons and talisman treasures hovered in the air. There were also many people who simply relied on their own cultivation to fly in the air. No one wanted to miss the most exciting scene. The disciples who were preparing to climb the stairway were already eager to try. Among them, there were more than a dozen famous geniuses who had already planned to show off their skills on the celestial stairway and attract the attention of the world. Looking at their expressions, almost all of them had a kind of confidence that they could do it. The previous record of the stairway to heaven was set by Xianxia of the Green Jade Immortal Island. On the heaven stairway, she had climbed to the 63rd step of the heaven stairway, which was unprecedented. And now, Xianxia was recognized by almost all sects as a cultivation genius. Who knew how many young talents were looking forward to getting Xianxia's attention? Perhaps they might even have the opportunity to dual cultivate. That was simply a dream. The 10 golden core experts were already in position. After a while, the originally ordinary stone steps began to flicker with a faint light. Seeing this, all the geniuses who were waiting to climb the stairway to heaven became serious. The first to walk up was a disciple of the Wind Cloud Palace who was at the 7th level of Qi training. The first to walk up was a disciple of the Wind Cloud Palace who was at the 7th level of Qi training. Everyone watched as he slowly and firmly took 3 steps on the heaven stairway and stepped onto the 3rd level of the heaven stairway. Following that, his footsteps became chaotic, sometimes fast and sometimes slow. After he reached the 14th step of the heaven stairway, he could no longer hold on. Soon after, the heaven stairway lit up and this disciple of the Wind Cloud Palace was sent to the foot of the mountain. The disciple who appeared at the foot of the mountain then realized that he had been pushed out of the stairway to heaven. But he had no time to check how many steps he had taken. He sat down on the spot and began to meditate, as if he had entered a state of enlightenment. This kind of situation had probably occurred countless times in the past, and everyone knew what was going on. However, no one disturbed the meditating Wind Cloud Palace disciple. Everyone's gazes converged on the second person on the stairway to the heavens. At the same time, many people had begun to discuss. Xie Daoist of the Wind Cloud Palace only took the 14th step. What a pity. I don't know what he saw, I'm curious. It still depends on the disciples of the Taishanmen, Chengkuan sect, Five Elements sect, Blue Cloud sect, and Green Jade Immortal Island. Amidst the crowd's discussion, this year's new disciples took turns to ascend the sky stairway one by one. The light on the stairway to heaven was constantly flashing, as if it had never dimmed. Reincarnation Valley, one was level 17 and one was level 23. Both disciples were famous geniuses, especially the disciple who had ascended to the 23rd step, who was already famous in the world. When everyone saw this result, they were all in awe. His reputation was well-deserved. Mo Yun sect, the two geniuses were both below the 15th step. It seemed that their two geniuses came purely with the purpose of training and did not care much about the result. But after the two disciples came down from the stairway, their faces were full of joy, as if they had benefited a lot. This time, there was a male disciple from the Green Jade Immortal Island who directly crossed the 28th step of the heaven. It was immediately spread. This was already the best result among the dozens of people who went up the stairway to heaven today. Coming down from the stairway to heaven, the disciple of the Green Jade Immortal Island did not immediately retreat like the others, but sat quietly in the same place, watching the performance of those who went up the stairway behind him, looking very relaxed. However, the limelight of the Green Jade Immortal Island had just come out, and immediately a female disciple of the Taishanmen snatched all the halos. The 7th level of Qi refining, the descendant of Xianxia, climbed the stairway to the 35th step of the heaven. Except for the fact that she couldn't be with Xianxia, she was a talented disciple with a great future. This year, the two rookie disciples of the Green Jade Immortal Island were all shining brightly, and the light was unparalleled. Even the Taishanmen couldn't match them. Soon, it was the turn of the two disciples of the Chunyang Palace. Chapter 82. Because of Yang Chen's previous challenge, Chunyang Palace had left a deep impression in everyone's mind. Yang Chen beheaded Han Jianda with one slash. Although many sects did not say it out loud, they were slightly dissatisfied in their hearts. In any case, everyone always felt that there was no need to fight to the death since they were both famous and decent sections. However, this time, Yang Chen of Chunyang Palace did a really good job. He directly admitted defeat in the competition. Everyone knew this. Moreover, Yang Chen had said in advance that he would admit defeat in the competition. If they wanted to know his actual strength, they had to challenge him to the death. For the sake of his reputation, Han Jianda took the initiative to challenge Yang Chen to the death, but many people selectively ignored this point. Perhaps it was because Yang Chen, with the strength of the 2nd level of Qi refining, defeated Han Jianda, who was at the 6th level of Qi refining. Many people felt that the dignity of the senior had been challenged. In addition, no one knew where Yang Chen's background as an executioner came from, so they were very unhappy with Yang Chen. Therefore, they also had the same opinion about Gong Sunling, another disciple of Chunyang Palace. Senior sister, the Heaven Stairway's illusory matrix may be different from any illusory matrix you have studied. Before Gong Sunling was about to go up the Heaven Stairway, Yang Chen stopped her and said in a low voice, "Sometimes, it may launch an attack based on the weakness of your character. Senior sister, when necessary, you have to strike like a thunderbolt. You can't just think about making peace and making concessions." Gong Sunling was very stunned. She had never thought about what Yang Chen said to her before. Moreover, Yang Chen said it very confidently, as if Yang Chen knew the Heaven Stairway's illusory matrix very well. It could not help but make Gong Sunling a little surprised. Fortunately, Gong Sunling believed that Yang Chen would not harm her. She nodded slightly, gave Yang Chen a smile, and then stepped onto the first step of the Heaven Stairway. Among the 10 supreme masters in Jiedan realm, only Su Chengxin was the head of the Foreign Affairs Hall of Chunyang Palace. The other 9 were all trying to make a fool of Chunyang Palace. As soon as Gong Sunling stepped onto the heaven step, she immediately felt a mountain-like pressure. A second-level qi refining disciple from Chunyang Palace has been in the limelight for the past few days. I wonder how this female disciple will perform. Deliberately mystifying. When have you ever seen a second-layer qi practitioner kill a sixth-layer qi practitioner? This isn't just a difference of 4 realms. When have you ever seen someone in the second layer of qi refining use a talisman treasure? This time, Chunyang Palace clearly wants to confuse the public and the public. If not for the fact that the Heaven Stairway can only be climbed by disciples in the qi refining realm, maybe Chunyang Palace will also send 2 disciples in the Foundation Establishment realm. Among the many discussions, this voice was very unique and also the loudest. At the very least, the onlookers all heard it clearly. Originally, everyone was still shocked by Yang Qin killing Han Jianda. Now hearing this voice, everyone seemed to have a feeling of a sudden realization. So that was it. Han Jianda's head was cut off with 1 strike. If that saber was an ordinary saber, no one would believe it. It was definitely a top-notch talisman weapon, or even a talisman treasure. But to control a talisman treasure, it was something that could only be done with the cultivation of the 6th or 7th layer qi practitioner. A 6th or even 7th layer qi practitioner defeating a 6th layer qi practitioner didn't seem to be worth bragging about. Yang Chen was in the 2nd layer qi practitioner. This was said by Chunyang Palace and also by Yang Chen. Naturally, others couldn't verify whether it was true or false, unless Yang Chen was willing to let these people's spiritual power enter his body and do whatever he wanted. Of course, Yang Chen couldn't do this, and others certainly wouldn't be so bored as to verify Yang Chen's cultivation in this way. The guy who spoke used this point to arouse everyone's suspicion. Suddenly, in addition to most people staring at Yang Chen with unkind eyes, even the way they looked at Gong Sunling was a little strange. If Chunyang Palace only relied on this kind of confusing means to gain fame, it was really too despicable. Everyone seemed to think that they had discovered the truth. In their hearts, they were also very looking forward to Chunyang Palace not getting any good results on the Heaven Stairway this time. Seeing that Gong Sunling had already walked 10 steps on the Heaven Stairway, nosy people had already begun to talk about how many steps Gong Sunling could take before she would be pushed down by the Heaven Stairway. On the Heaven Stairway, Gong Sunling's pace was neither fast nor slow. It was very stable. So far, there was no sign of panic. Under the expectant eyes of a group of people, she walked another 10 steps calmly and steadily, and there was still no sign of instability. This Taoist brother Gongsun is an array cultivator. Someone seemed to have noticed some inside information and shouted loudly. The people who heard the voice were immediately disdainful. They clearly knew that the Heaven Stairway was an illusory array, but they still sent an array cultivator in. This Taoist brother Gongsun was not famous before. It could be said that he was simply studying illusory arrays. If he could get a good ranking in this way, Chunyang Palace would do anything for fame this year. It was a pity that Gong Sunling was such a delicate beauty. Perhaps she could become a rising star of a sect, and she also had a certain strength. It was just that under the arrangement of Chunyang Palace, she fell into the name of falsification. What a pity! Many people looked at Gong Sunling's elegant body and already charming face, and they all issued such a sigh in their hearts. No matter what everyone thought, Gong Sunling still calmly stepped on the 30th step of the Heaven Stairway. At this step, even those who despised Gong Sunling for being an array cultivator could not help but admire her. Those who could reach the 30th step of the Heaven Stairway were definitely geniuses. An array cultivator was also a cultivator, and there was no rule that an array cultivator could not climb the Heaven Stairway. At this point, Gong Sunling's footsteps were still stable, but the speed had slowed down. 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. When she stepped on the 35th step of the Heaven Stairway, Gong Sunling had already tied the record of the female disciple of the Green Jade Immortal Island today. But this was not the end. Gong Sunling still firmly stepped up, but the expression on her face became very serious, as if she was facing a powerful enemy. On her snow-white jade-like skin, there were crystal beads of sweat. 40, 45, 50, the onlookers had already thrown away the contempt in the beginning. To be able to reach the 50th step of the heaven stairway, she was definitely a genius among geniuses. Chunyang Palace had picked up a treasure this time. It was not until the 53rd step of the heaven stairway that Gong Sunling's figure began to shake. Every step she took forward seemed to be resisting tremendous pressure. Such a beautiful and weak woman, but she showed a will that did not lose to any man present. Gong Sunling's performance has been recognized by everyone. 58, 59, 60, 61, under the nervous gaze of countless people and even secretly counting in their hearts, Gong Sunling finally could not hold on any longer. After stepping on the 62nd step of the heaven stairway, her figure shook violently, and then she disappeared and appeared at the foot of the mountain. Boom, the scene was like a huge bomb detonated, and it suddenly boiled up. Chapter 83. Since the discovery of the heaven stairway, the record on the heaven stairway was set by Fairy Shur of the Green Jade Immortal Island. Now, an unknown female disciple of the Chunyang Palace had actually climbed to the 62nd level of the heaven stairway, catching up with Fairy Shur in the past. Although it was slightly worse than Fairy Shur's, it was still a shocking record. This was definitely the strongest record on the heaven stairway this year, and the onlookers had witnessed the birth of such a powerful record. Compared with the record of the 62nd level of the heaven stairway, the previous female disciple of the Green Jade Immortal Island's 35th level of the heaven stairway was simply a joke. No one said anything strange like a ray cultivator anymore. Even if it was a ray cultivator, Gong Sunling had really climbed to the 62nd level of the heaven stairway in front of everyone's eyes. Even if it was a guy who was not convinced, in the face of such a situation, in addition to shock, it seemed that there was only admiration left. As for other words of cheating, they could not say anything at all. Especially the 10 Jiedan stage masters who presided over the heaven stairway. In addition to Su Qingxin, the other 9 Jiedan stage masters all knew that when Gong Sunling climbed the heaven stairway, they had a tacit understanding and deliberately put a lot of pressure on Gong Sunling. It must be known that this was a few Jiedan stage masters teaming up to bully a disciple in the Qi refining stage. Under such circumstances, Gong Sunling was still able to climb to the 62nd level of the heaven stairway. Under real circumstances, she was afraid that she was no worse than Xianxia. Su Qingxin was so happy that he was about to explode. This time, Chunyang Palace's floating mountain gathering was simply outstanding. There was no sect more glorious than Chunyang Palace. Not to mention that Yangchen cut off the head of Han Jianda from the Tianquan sect with the cultivation of the 2nd level of the Qi refining stage. Just the fact that Gong Sunling had climbed to the 62nd level of the heaven stairway was enough to let everyone know that Chunyang Palace had a genius disciple who was chasing after Fairy Shur of the Green Jade Immortal Island. In the past, because their disciples were not good enough, they were ridiculed by fellow Daoists from other sects, but from now on, there would be no more. When he thought of this, Su Qingxin felt as if he had eaten an iced watermelon during the hottest days of summer. He felt refreshed from the inside out. Who would dare to boast in front of him in the future? In addition to the Green Jade Immortal Island, even those insufferably arrogant guys in Taishanmen, in the face of Gong Sunling's achievements, they couldn't say half a word. Gong Sunling, a disciple, was enough to make the entire Chunyang Palace proud. Thinking of this, when Su Qingxin looked at the other 9 Jiedan stage masters in other directions, the angle of his eyes seemed to be adjusted a little. Although he didn't dare to say that he was looking at people with his chin, it was almost like his nostrils were facing these guys. Because of the shock caused by Gong Sunling, the 10 Jiedan stage masters all stopped. Su Qingxin looked at the other 9 proudly, and the pride on his face was undisguised. In the face of Gong Sunling's record, the other 9 Jiedan stage masters also acquiesced to Su Qingxin's pride. Although they were unhappy in their hearts, there was no way around it. Who told them to not have such an outstanding disciple in their sect? Gong Sunling was pushed out of the heaven ladder and appeared at the foot of the mountain. It may be because she had spent a lot of effort on the heaven ladder. Just as she wanted to take a step, her feet were soft and her body fell forward involuntarily. Yang Chen, who had been watching all this, took a step forward and reached out to support Gong Xuanling's soft body. Although he reached out and touched Gong Xuanling's waist, it was soft and smooth. Yang Chen's heart couldn't help but sway. Gong Xuanling, who was supported by Yang Chen, blushed. She was about to push him away, but she noticed that the place where she was supported by Yang Chen was slowly passing an earth attribute spiritual power. In a flash, this spiritual power rushed into most of Gong Xuanling's body and replenished some of Gong Xuanling's almost exhausted spiritual power. With the help of this spiritual power, Gong Xuanling stood up straight and smiled at Yang Chen again. "Junior brother Yang, thank you." Others thought that Gong Xuanling was thanking Yang Chen for helping her, but Gong Xuanling herself was very clear that this was what Yang Chen said before she climbed the heaven ladder. If it weren't for those words, maybe Gong Xuanling wouldn't have been able to hold on at the 50th level of heaven stage. It was entirely because of Yang Chen's reminder that she was able to set foot on the 62nd level of heaven stage. Everything that happened on the heaven ladder was still fresh in Gong Xuanling's memory, especially the last few steps, which simply exhausted her whole body's energy. However, it also benefited Gong Xuanling a lot. The illusion attacks that followed, as Yang Chen said, were completely aimed at her character weaknesses and were impossible to guard against. If it weren't for Yang Chen's reminder, Gong Xuanling wouldn't even know how to deal with it. People who went down the heaven ladder would usually go into seclusion and have an epiphany at the first moment to understand what they had realized on the heaven ladder. But Gong Xuanling didn't do this. Instead, after a short rest, she sat quietly on the side. She wanted to know how many levels of heaven stage Yang Chen could climb on the heaven ladder. After a short period of surprise and discussion, the 10 Jiedan stage masters once again entered the state. The heaven ladder once again emitted a faint light, indicating that the next person could set foot on the heaven ladder. After Gong Xuanling, it was Yang Chen. Looking at the heaven ladder that was shining, Yang Chen didn't seem to be facing the heaven ladder, but an ordinary path. He lifted his feet and directly stepped on it without any decent preparation. He had just seen a peerless genius cautiously climbing the heaven ladder, and now he suddenly saw a sloppy guy. Even Su Qingxin, who was also from Chunyang Palace, was a little dissatisfied. Even if he didn't care about these things, he should at least do some superficial work, right? Such carelessness, compared with Gong Xuanling, a genius disciple, was simply a disgrace to Chunyang Palace. The other 9 Jiedan stage masters were even more dissatisfied. Just at this time, someone in the crowd seemed to say something to Yang Chen. "Sigh, an executioner is indeed an executioner. It's hard for him to enter the Hall of Elegance." This sentence seemed to arouse a trace of resonance in the hearts of the crowd. Needless to say, the 9 Jiedan stage masters once again made a tacit decision. Since Yang Chen didn't take it seriously, then they must teach him an unforgettable lesson. He was an executioner, then they must let him suffer a huge setback in his identity as an executioner. An executioner, killing without mercy. The External Affairs Hall Master of the Tianquan sect was the one with the strongest hatred. Han Jianda died in the hands of Yang Chen. No matter how unethical Han Jianda was, he was still a disciple of the Tianquan sect. Being killed by Yang Chen was a disgrace to the Tianquan sect. Thinking of this, the Hall Master also made a decision. Let's see how many you can kill. Chapter 84. The 10 Golden Core Grandmasters who were in charge of the Heaven Stairway could add their own imaginations to the illusion of the Heaven Stairway. This was the unique feature of the Heaven Stairway formation, and also the power of the Wenxin Road. The most amazing thing was that the 10 Golden Core Grandmasters who were in charge of the Heaven Stairway could communicate freely and coordinate with each other through their divine senses. When Gong Xuanling ascended the Heaven Stairway, other than Su Qingxin, the others used this trick to create obstacles for Gong Xuanling. Now that Yang Chen was on the Heaven Stairway, everyone used the same trick, except for the Tianquan sect's External Affairs Hall Master. As soon as he set foot on the Heaven Stairway, Yang Chen felt like he was in the execution ground. In front of him were 10 prisoners who were already tied up and waiting to be executed. He had already restored his red hair tied up, his upper body bare, and he was holding a demon-headed executioner's saber in his hand. However, the demon-headed saber in his hand looked like the murderous saber from the immortal beheading stage, which was also the sword box in Yang Chen's merit ring. The illusion was born from the heart. Everything was based on the knowledge in Yang Chen's mind, which allowed him to borrow the power of the formation to form the illusion. Seeing this familiar scene, Yang Chen's face revealed a scornful smile. Using this to make things difficult for Yang Chen, wasn't that walking right into a trap? He waved the murderous saber in his hand, and in a moment, 10 heads fell to the ground. The scene in front of him changed slightly, and the 10 people quickly became 100. After the 100, it was another 1,000. No matter how many people came to Yang Chen, it was just a matter of the number of times he waved his saber. There was no need for him to think. Every time he waved his saber, Yang Chen did not seem to have any hesitation. 1 slash for one person, and all of them were beheaded with 1 slash. After chopping off 1,000 heads, the prisoners in front of him finally had some changes. Originally, there were some burly prisoners, but this time, there were women. There were all kinds of types. Some were coquettish, some were delicate and elegant, some were arrogant, and some were gentle. They were all different. Of the 10 women, some were crying out that they were wronged, some were weeping, some were affectionate, and some were glaring angrily. Yang Chen did not hesitate at all. He still used a knife one by one, and the result was these female criminals. Next, 100 women, 1,000 women, begging, tempting, cursing, subservient, all sorts of things appeared. The women's bodies grew more and more graceful, and their faces grew more and more beautiful. It was as if as long as Yang Chen wanted to, they could offer themselves to him at any time, as long as Yang Chen didn't wield his blade. No matter what kind of opponent he was facing, Yang Chen just slashed down with his saber without the slightest bit of pity. After the woman, the prisoners became white-haired old men. 10, 100, 1,000. In the illusion, Yang Chen spent a very long time to cut off that many heads, but in reality, everyone saw Yang Chen step by step on the heaven rank and was already at the 9th head. Does he really have a heart of stone? The head of the External Affairs Hall of the Migres sect thought to himself. Not everyone could cut off thousands of heads without hesitation. But he didn't give up. Instead, his fighting spirit was aroused. I don't believe that you can cut off just anyone. In front of Yang Chen, 10 children appeared. There were boys and girls. Yang Chen didn't care about this at all. He brandished his saber mechanically. In the blink of an eye, 100 children, 1,000 children, were beheaded by Yang Chen one by one. This time, 10 babies appeared. Their small bodies were still wrapped in swaddling clothes, but they appeared on the execution ground. When Xin path, since I'm going to walk the path of an executioner, I won't care about the identity of any opponent. Yang Chen gave himself a firm answer in his heart. The saber in his hand slashed towards the 10 babies without hesitation. Then, another 100 babies, 1,000 babies. After the babies, it was ferocious beasts, evil spirits, demons, and monsters. Facing these, Yang Chen didn't hesitate at all. No matter how seductive they were, or how ferocious they were, or how pitiful they were, or how pitiful they were, or how they were begging for mercy. Even the attacks of the demons and monsters were all useless in front of Yang Chen. All of this, Yang Chen seemed to turn a blind eye to it. In response to those, he just chopped down again and again. After beheading these demons and monsters, the people in front of Yang Chen were replaced by the people around him. Sun Haijing beheaded. Chu Heng beheaded. Han Jianda beheaded. The 4 servants, Shenda, Yuan Ting, Gu Kun, and He Lian, respectfully saluted Yang Chen. Yang Chen's response was still a slash. After beheading the 4 servants, Shanghai Feng and Steward Wang appeared one after another. Yang Chen also beheaded without hesitation. Su Qingxin beheaded. Sun Qingxue beheaded. Shi Shanshan beheaded. Du Qian beheaded. Zhu Chintao beheaded. Gong Sunling beheaded. Parents beheaded. Master beheaded. The people who appeared became more and more important in Yang Chen's mind. However, Yang Chen didn't care who they were. It was as if he was honing his mind in this illusion. Without hesitation, he beheaded them one by one without any ripples in his heart. All of these were in the illusion. Yang Chen didn't have any psychological burden. "Junior brother, you finally finished the sky stairway." Yang Chen waved his saber mechanically. Suddenly, the scene changed. He was already standing at the entrance of the sky stairway at the foot of the floating mountain. Next to him, the weak Gong Sunling had recovered a lot. She looked at Yang Chen with a smile. Her face was full of surprise and pride. Suddenly, there was a burst of noise in his ears. Shock, doubt, madness, all kinds of voices filled Yang Chen's ears. A disciple at the second level of Qi training had actually finished all the steps of the sky stairway. This was simply impossible. Su Qingxin's voice came from afar. In the midst of his laughter, he seemed to be showing off to everyone, I, the outer sect disciple of Chunyang Palace, have finished all the steps of the sky stairway. No one has ever done it before, and no one will be able to do it in the future. Who dares to not be convinced? His pride was overflowing in his words. After the initial doubt and shock, the onlookers no longer looked at him with contempt. Instead, it was replaced with a complicated look of worship, jealousy, and unwillingness to be convinced. The more it was like this, the more Yang Chen felt an unparalleled sense of accomplishment. Convincing the enemy was even more satisfying than making his own people happy. "Fellow Daoist Yang, I always thought that you were a master at the 7th level of Qi training, pretending to be at the 2nd level of Qi training. It seems that I was wrong. I hereby apologize to fellow Daoist Yang. Please forgive me." The guy who previously questioned Yang Chen's big mouth also jumped out and admitted defeat to Yang Chen. "Fellow Daoist Yang's will is firm. I admire it. Unfortunately, no matter how well you put it, it's just an illusion." Yang Chen's eyes suddenly lit up. A murderous saber suddenly appeared in his hand. He slashed at the guy who spoke. Then he suddenly turned around and slashed at Gong Suanling's neck. Chapter 85. With 2 slashes, 2 heads flew up, blood splashed everywhere, and the people around were in chaos. "Evil creature, what are you doing? Killing your fellow disciples, deceiving your master, and destroying your ancestors." Countless scoldings came one after another. There were a few impatient people who had even sacrificed their talisman treasures. They were only waiting for the order of the masters in the Jedon stage who presided over the heaven ladder. They would rush up and tear Yang Chen's body into pieces. "Pumph." Yang Chen snorted coldly and said disdainfully, "No matter how real your illusion is, in my eyes, it is still an illusion. Break for me." Swish, everything disappeared, and in front of Yang Chen, there was only an endless stairway leading to the sky, and the end could not be seen. On each step, there was a person standing, looking at Yang Chen coldly. "Killing the innocent, you will die without a burial place in the future." Stepping on the first step, standing on the step was a disciple that Yang Chen saw in Yeshio Villa of Chunyang Palace, who opened his mouth and said to Yang Chen. Crack, when he finished speaking, Yang Chen stretched out his hand and slashed, and then directly stepped on the second step. "Killing without thinking, be careful of karma." On the second step, it was also a disciple of Yeshio Villa. What he said was also that killing was wrong. Yang Chen's way of dealing with it was very simple. No matter who the other party was, he just needed to stretch out his hand and slash, and then directly step on the next step. Everyone was saying the same thing, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. Yang Chen didn't even know how many people he had killed and how many words he had heard. The disciples of Chunyang Palace that Yang Chen knew had long been killed, and now everyone who appeared would even report their identity. The disciples of Taishanmen, Chenkuan sect, 5 Elements sect, Green Jade Immortal Island, Blue Cloud sect, Tianquan sect, and countless sects were all killed by Yang Chen one by one. Apart from these people, there were also the prisoners that Yang Chen had just killed, the old, the weak, the sick, and the infants. Their words had been repeated in Yang Chen's ears at least 1,000 times, and every time Yang Chen heard it, he would ask himself what was in his heart. Sometimes, even you would believe it yourself. Not to mention that Yang Chen didn't know any of the people here. Everyone said the same thing, which was to deny Yang Chen's actions. The Heaven Stairway was also known as the Path of Questioning Heart, and it lived up to its name. Almost all of these people's words were targeted at Yang Chen's identity as an executioner. In addition to the people he killed later, everyone's purpose was to make Yang Chen waver in the hearts of the people he had killed before. Yang Chen knew that as long as he was persuaded by anyone, even if his heart wavered a little, his Tao foundation would immediately become unstable and he would be pushed out of the Heaven Stairway. If it was anyone else, after killing so many people, there would be times when they would be soft-hearted. Even if their hands were not soft, there would be some soft-hearted. However, these had no effect on Yang Chen at all. Yang Chen just mechanically repeated the action of waving the knife, step by step going up and down the stairs. The people who appeared were getting more and more important. The disciples of the foundation stage, the masters of the Jidan stage, these disciples with high cultivation bases were no longer using words to disturb Yang Chen's mind, and even added their own majestic aura to oppress Yang Chen and make Yang Chen yield. Unfortunately, no matter what means these people used, Yang Chen was always unmoved. However, before Yang Chen waved the knife, he would always ask himself if the people he had killed and the people he was going to kill would he regret it in the future. In a short moment, every time Yang Chen gave the result, he would never regret it. Originally, in the Immortal Executioner's platform, the will in the fierce knife had already entered the body of Yang Chen. Until Yang Chen left the Immortal Executioner's platform, the fierce will did not disappear from Yang Chen's body, but dormant. Perhaps it was because he had killed too many immortals. In the face of mortals, he could not bring up the killing intent. But now thousands of people were asking the same question, and it finally aroused the killing intent. In the process of Yang Chen constantly questioning his heart, and in the process of waving the knife without hesitation, this killing intent began to rise slowly. In the past, Yang Chen killed people. He never thought about whether killing was right or not, or whether killing was good or not. But now, every step, Yang Chen had to consider such questions. And every time Yang Chen got the answer, it was a sharpening of his heart. There was no regret, it was the original heart. When one's faith became more and more firm, no matter what one did, it would be indomitable. Because of this heart without regret, the killing intent of the Immortal Executioner's platform finally merged with Yang Chen's heart bit by bit. The process of interrogating Yang Chen's heart also seemed to accelerate the process of this integration. Every time he asked his heart, it seemed to integrate a little. After tens of thousands of people, Yang Chen had almost integrated the killing intent by half. The faces of the 10 Jidan stage masters who presided over the battle had become more and more serious. Originally, they thought that they could easily suppress a little guy in the second layer of qi refining, but the current situation looked very bad. Yang Chen had set foot on the 50th level of Heaven stage, and there was still no sign of stopping. This kind of inner interrogation that the several Jidan stage masters designed for Yang Chen had begun to have an impact on themselves. The imposing manner of the Jidan stage masters not only did not suppress Yang Chen, but on the contrary, there was a fierce killing intent on Yang Chen's body. Even these Jidan stage masters, when they first came into contact with this will, could not help but tremble all over. Even if it was a peerless demon, a few of them had never been so afraid from the bottom of their hearts. However, a junior in the second layer of qi refining now made them feel this way. It was just that now they were presiding over the battle and could not leave easily. Among the 10 Jidan stage masters, at least 9 of them were bitterly enduring the terrifying imposing manner from Yang Chen's body. They could not stop even if they wanted to. It was unknown how many masters were cursing the head of the External Affairs Hall of the Tianquan sect in their hearts. Whether it was to avenge his sect's Han Jianda or to vent his anger, he insisted on dragging everyone to make an issue of Yang Chen's identity as an executioner. In the end, it was hard to get off the tiger. Yang Chen's killing intent was getting stronger and stronger. They did not even know how sharp the killing intent in Yang Chen's heart would be after experiencing the Heaven Stairway Inquisition. But now, no one cared about this. What they cared about was how long Yang Chen could hold on. They could not hold on any longer. The audience outside were all dumbfounded. Gong Sunling could ascend to the 62nd level of Heaven stage. That was a genius. But now, a disciple in the second layer of Qi refining from the Chunyang Palace had actually ascended to the 50th level of Heaven stage. What was this? This year's Chunyang Palace Genius Explosion. Chapter 86. The Jiedon stage master of the Tianquan sect was also complaining in his heart. How could he know that on a whim, because of Gong Sunling's brilliance, the imbalance in his heart caused by Yang Chen's killing of Han Jianda suddenly broke out in his heart? He wanted to use Yang Chen's identity as an executioner to do something, to destroy Yang Chen's Dao Foundation, but now it has evolved into this. Using murder as a crime to incessantly interrogate Yang Chen's heart, the Tianquan sect grandmaster's heart could not be said to be not vicious. Once Yang Chen was shaken by the fact that he had killed someone, then it would not be as simple as being pushed out of the heaven stairway. Countless interrogations were enough to plant a thorn in Yang Chen's heart. Whenever Yang Chen wanted to improve his cultivation, because of the wavering of his faith, it would evolve into a huge demon in his heart. At that time, needless to say, the improvement of his cultivation, being able to keep his life from being haunted by the demon in his heart, would already be the best outcome. The illusion was born from the heart, and others would not know what Yang Chen had experienced in the illusion. And these Golden Core Grandmasters who were in charge of the formation only provided some targeted imaginary attacks based on the weaknesses of the people who were initially affected by the Heaven Stairway. Because of the previous adaptation process, even if they failed, the normal people who took the test would only benefit a lot, and they would also know where their weaknesses were. And Yang Chen had been schemed against by the Golden Core Grandmasters from the beginning, so he was not given such a chance to adapt at all. They directly interrogated him about his identity as the executioner. But now, not only did they not let Yang Chen back out, but they also dragged everyone down, unable to stop. All the spiritual energy in their bodies had been completely absorbed by the Heaven Stairway's formation. As a last resort, these Grandmasters had already begun to swallow elixirs to maintain the formation's operation. Even at this stage, no one dared to let go. Once they defended, the formation would backfire, and the result would be even more terrifying than exhausting their spiritual energy. I don't believe that nascent soul and Mahayana experts cannot suppress him. A Grandmaster cried out in his mind. Pooh, a mouthful of blood essence was spat out, which merged into the formation of the stairway to heaven. Hong, the expert that appeared in front of Yang Chen, already had an incomparable might. Under the enormous pressure, Yang Chen even felt as though he was about to be pressed to the ground. However, the surging killing intent in his chest and his unyielding will made him choose to face these experts head-on. Every step was incomparably difficult. In the eyes of outsiders, Yang Chen's footsteps had slowed down. It was extremely difficult, as if he was about to fail. 57, 58, 59. Seeing that Yang Chen was about to cross the 60th level of the heaven rank, the spectators were completely speechless. The two disciples of the Pure Yang Palace were simply two monstrous geniuses. One was in the 6th layer of Qi refining, and the other was only in the 2nd layer of Qi refining. The others didn't know how to describe it anymore. However, Yang Chen's footsteps did not stop at all. He continued to move forward with determination. Although he was slow, he never stopped. Gotcha, as if he had crossed a space in one step, Yang Chen suddenly felt the pressure lightened. In front of Yang Chen, the characters in the spiritual world in Yang Chen's memory had already appeared. Whether they were good to him or bad to him, facing Yang Chen, they were just asking him the same question. And every time, there were two of them. The original pressure did not increase qualitatively. Yang Chen understood that these Jiedon stage masters had seen the masters of nascent soul and Mahayana stage and could barely simulate the momentum. But the masters who had ascended did not know what the situation was, so they could not simulate that kind of momentum and realm at all. On the contrary, it made Yang Chen feel that the pressure was reduced. The will of the immortal beheading platform was constantly merging with Yang Chen's body. It seemed that the stronger the people Yang Chen killed, the more it recognized Yang Chen and further integrated into Yang Chen's body. Yang Chen stepped on the heaven stage step by step, and the few Jian stage masters outside were almost unable to hold on. Except for Su Qingxin, who was simply providing spiritual power for the operation of the formation, the others were getting more and more desperate. He dared to kill the seniors who ascended to the spiritual world. What else can stop him? Yang Chen had already reached the 80th level of the heaven stage, which no one had ever done before, and the hearts of the 9 Jian stage masters were full of despair. Everyone had already contributed a mouthful of blood essence, and their spirits were about to collapse. If the illusion formation was broken, it meant that the person in charge of the formation would suffer a backlash. The Tianquan sect's external affairs hall master gritted his teeth and spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood essence on the core of the formation. His heart was filled with hatred. I don't believe that you dared to kill those from the spiritual world, and also the deities of the heavenly court. After a series of communication through divine sense, the other Jian stage masters in charge of the formation also acted in unison. All of them spat out blood essence, and then began the final battle. The crowd, who was filled with joy, did not know that when Yang Chen saw the people from the heavenly court, even the last bit of pressure completely disappeared. Yang Chen had already died in his hands. Would he still face their interrogation and admit that it was wrong to kill them? Yang Chen's footsteps were almost the same as his initial speed. His footsteps were swift, and he stepped on the last 20 levels of the heaven stage as if he was flying. When Yang Chen stepped on the last level of the heaven stage, the whole floating mountain was in an uproar. Ever since the heaven stairway was discovered, no one had been able to completely climb the heaven stage. But now, the crowd saw a legend in front of them. Yang Chen, a disciple of the 2nd level of the Qi refinement realm in Chunyang Palace, had actually walked all the way to the top. This was simply a miracle. Countless messaging amulets flew in the sky, and for a moment, they almost covered the sky. The moment Yang Chen reached the top, the 10 Jian stage masters in charge of the formation all spat out blood simultaneously. Su Qingxin could not hold on any longer, but to him, it was only a loss of spiritual energy. After 3 to 5 days of recuperation, he would recover quickly. But Su Qingxin was still ecstatic. A disciple of Chunyang Palace had climbed the heaven stairway, and Chunyang Palace had never been so proud before. However, the others were not so lucky. They had already spat out a few mouthfuls of blood essence. This mouthful of blood had even shaken their internal organs. Even with miraculous elixirs, they would not be able to recover in a short period of time. It would already be lucky for them to be able to maintain their original realm after half a year. However, no one noticed what was happening here. Everyone's eyes were all focused on the shining figure at the top of the heaven stairway. Everyone was curious about what benefits there would be after reaching the top of the heaven stairway. At this moment, Yang Chen was trapped in the final integration process and could not move for the time being. But the heaven stairway under his feet began to frantically pour spiritual energy into his body, as if it was helping him. Chapter 87. The will of the immortal executioner's platform was almost 30% integrated with Yang Chen. However, before Yang Chen reached the top, there was some momentum. It seemed that the excitement brought by the killing in the later illusion was not enough to interest the fierce will. The process of integration, after Yang Chen reached the top, finally stopped slowly. Even so, Yang Chen, who was standing at the top of the heaven ladder, still exuded a fierce aura that made people tremble. Several of the closest Jian stage masters, after being hit by this aura, the 9 Jian stage masters, who were already seriously injured, fainted directly. Only Su Qingxin, although there was some fear in his heart, was still very happy. After all, Yang Chen was a disciple of Chunyang Palace, and this was a feat that added glory to the sect. In Yang Chen's body, an extremely powerful spiritual power rushed into it. It was almost the only power that the Jian stage masters who presided over the battle at the last moment spat out their blood essence. 10 spiritual powers in Yang Chen's meridians began to flow quickly, trying to promote the complete integration of the will of the immortal executioner's platform and Yang Chen. But this integration was interrupted, and the remaining spiritual power began to replenish crazily in Yang Chen's body. 10 Jedon stage masters, even when they were almost exhausted, the last spiritual power released by the blood essence was stronger than the medicinal power of 10 profound yang fruits. And this was the pure spiritual power after being transformed by the heaven ladder. Even the effort of transforming the medicinal power was saved. The 5 elements secret art of yin-yang reversal ran wildly, and this huge spiritual power began to compress and purify to the extreme. Fortunately, the heaven ladder array had slowly stopped running after losing the person presiding over the array. Otherwise, Yang Chen could not bear such a huge spiritual power. The meridians expanded unprecedentedly. Fortunately, Yang Chen's body had been transformed by the essence of countless immortals and was extremely strong. Although he had reached the limit, he could still bear it. It was also Yang Chen's luck. The heaven ladder asked the heart, and the array found that the integration of Yang Chen and the will of the immortal executioner's platform required a lot of spiritual power, and the 10 Jedon stage masters were almost emptied. Now the integration was not completed. If there was a candidate to preside over the array, Yang Chen would definitely explode from the spiritual power. But now, as long as he could get through the initial stage of the sudden increase in pressure, there was nothing left to worry about. Finally, someone discovered the situation of the 10 Jedon stage masters. Under the great shock, the onlookers could no longer pay attention to other things. Seeing that Yang Chen began to have an epiphany directly at the top of the heaven ladder, someone immediately rushed to help the 10 Jedon stage masters out, and then rushed to feed the elixirs on their bodies. At this time, being able to form a good relationship with a Jedon stage master was much better than any elixirs. Gong Sunling raised her head and looked at the figure sitting at the top of the stairway. Her beautiful eyes flashed and she suddenly realized that she was not surprised. It was as if Yang Chen reaching the top of the stairway was a matter of course in her heart. She seemed to have a similar feeling when Yang Chen first met her, but he just didn't realize it at that time. The people from the Thousand Autumns Pavilion quickly settled Su Qingxin down, and Gong Sunling did not have to worry about being ambushed at this time. She simply sat where she was and began to comprehend the bits and pieces she had obtained from climbing the stairway to heaven. Soon she entered a state of epiphany. Yang Chen, who was at the top of the stairway, did not have to worry about anyone approaching him to harm him. Not to mention the fact that there were so many people staring at him, just the aura that emanated from his body made people's souls tremble from the bottom of their hearts. Not many people dared to get within 1,000 feet of him. Some people who did not believe it wanted to launch a talisman treasure. The original intention was to explore the breadth of Yang Chen. However, when the talisman treasure was just close to a circle of 100 feet, the talisman treasure began to tremble wildly, as if it was about to break away from the control of its owner. The owner of the talisman treasure was so scared that he hurriedly took back the talisman treasure. Just for a while, the talisman treasure seemed to have dropped by half a level, which directly made the owner of the talisman treasure feel distressed. With this example, naturally, no one had any other thoughts. Everyone could only look at Yang Chen with an extremely envious gaze and sigh at the good luck of Chunyang Palace. 2 disciples, one reached the 62nd step, and the other directly reached the top. Could it be that from now on, Chunyang Palace would prosper? The 5 elements inverse yin-yang secret art seemed to be operating automatically, but in Yang Chen's mind, it seemed to be unprecedentedly relaxed and resolute. If the various opportunities that made him become the executioner of the heavenly court were said to be taking advantage of the situation, now Yang Chen had completely recognized what he had done before. The heaven stairway Wenxin Road made Yang Chen's mind more determined, and he had a greater sense of direction. Having integrated the will of the immortal beheading platform, he also knew what kind of path he should choose in the future. When he was reborn, Yang Chen just chose to no longer be the kind Yang Chen before. Now, Yang Chen wanted to be the Yang Chen who killed his way out of countless difficulties and dangers. The spiritual power that came from the heaven stairway was gentle and continuous, allowing Yang Chen to refine these 10 huge spiritual powers relatively easily. When Yang Chen devoted himself to the process of refining the spiritual power, the efficiency of the 5 elements inverse yin-yang secret art also increased greatly, and the speed of absorbing spiritual power was a bit faster. The fierce will of the immortal beheading platform fully reflected its strength at this moment. The spiritual power that entered Yang Chen's body was directly restrained by this will, and it did not dare to rush around at all. It also allowed Yang Chen to compress and refine the spiritual power step by step. No one knew what Yang Chen was doing. Seeing that Yang Chen had been meditating, they all thought that he was in an epiphany. The heaven stairway exuded a burst of five-colored light. It seemed that there was no Jedon stage master, but it was still running. No one knew what happened, but they also knew that they could not move easily. Countless news had been informed to the major sections. The disciples of the various sects who had already walked the heaven stairway at the foot of the heaven stairway had begun to wake up. Only Yang Chen was still motionless on it. For a few days, this situation had been maintained. The sects near the floating mountain had already sent a few masters, and the injured Jedon stage masters had also woken up and began to heal. Yang Chen finally woke up from the state of meditation. As soon as he opened his eyes, he felt that his whole body was indescribably comfortable. In the meridians of his whole body, a stream of overflowing spiritual power kept flowing. This feeling was extremely comfortable. After a careful exploration, Yang Chen was shocked by his own changes on the spot. Chapter 88. The spirit power of the five elements, which has been compressed and refined in the body, has broken through the standard of the third layer of the qi refining. In other words, unconsciously, Yang Chen broke through the realm of the second layer of the qi refining after climbing the heaven ladder and entered the third layer of the qi refining. Before, from the first layer of the qi refining to the second layer of the qi refining, Yang Chen spent almost a year. He first spent 8 months memorizing the entire scriptures pavilion, and then spent more than 3 months of hard work. Finally, after leaving for the underground spiritual vein of the predecessor, he broke through the second layer of the qi refining when he collected the sword case. From that breakthrough to the present, it has only been less than half a year. In the past 6 months, Yang Chen has been leisurely and step-by-step cultivation, without deliberately improving his strength. Unexpectedly, with the help of the heaven ladder, he broke through the realm of the third layer of the qi refining in one fell swoop. This was not the kind of spiritual power that entered the third layer because of the total amount of the spiritual power, but the spiritual power after the high compression and condensation of the yin-yang 5 elements. At the same time, it was not a spiritual power of one attribute, but the 5 elements, yin and yang, definitely beyond the ordinary third layer of the qi refining. What surprised Yang Chen even more was that because of the integration of the immortal beheading stage, his body seemed to have begun to show a real killing intent, but because of the illumination of the 5-color light of the heaven ladder, others were not very clear. Moreover, this killing intent was extremely condensed. It only appeared within a radius of 100 feet around Yang Chen's body, far away from this area. Others could only feel fear, but there was no kind of soul trembling in the face of the god of slaughter. This kind of killing intent was the best tonic for the 3 purities secret art. Without thinking about it, Yang Chen opened his eyes and noticed his state. He immediately closed his eyes and began the second layer of the 3 purities secret art. The killing intent all around the body was slowly absorbed. This time, it was the killing intent that the immortal beheading stage had accumulated for many years. It had been condensed for thousands of years. Perhaps the immortal killed was not as powerful as Yang Chen's, but it was also extraordinary. Under the crazy absorption of the 3 purities secret art, it still took a day and a night to transform it into spiritual awareness. With the help of this killing intent, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness directly rushed to the level of peak foundation establishment. Yang Chen's divine sense spread out completely, directly covering a radius of several hundred feet. Every movement in the surroundings seemed to be under Yang Chen's surveillance. It took Yang Chen 7 to 8 days to comprehend, at the top of the stairway to heaven. Except for a few people from Xianxia Pavilion from Chunyang Palace and Gong Sunling, no one else was watching. Yang Chen's awakening did not attract much attention. However, the fact that someone had successfully climbed to the top of the stairway had already caused an uproar in the entire cultivation world. Back then, when Xianxia ascended to the 63rd level of the heaven stage, it had already caused an earthquake. Later on, the strength of Xianxia's cultivation was obvious to all, and she had already won the good name of Fairy Shi in the cultivation world. Along with it, the ranking of the Green Jade Immortal Island among the sects in the entire cultivation world has also advanced. Now that Chunyang Palace had two genius disciples, one was Gong Sunling who had ascended to the 62nd level of the heaven stage, and the other was Yang Chen who had directly climbed to the top of the heaven stairway. No one could tell what kind of changes this would cause. The only thing that was certain was that Yang Chen and Gong Sunling would definitely be famous in the world, and they must be cultivation geniuses. Chunyang Palace may shine because of these two disciples. Gong Sunling and Xianxia were only one level away from each other. In addition, she was beautiful and outstanding. As long as she did not make any big mistakes, it could be imagined that in the near future, the reputation of Fairy Gong Sunling would be known in the cultivation world. As for Yang Chen, no one dared to judge. It was not that everyone was not optimistic about Yang Chen's cultivation potential, but they were not sure how good Yang Chen's future would be. In principle, Yang Chen's 5-element spirit root was very ordinary, but his determination was rare in the world. This has been recognized by everyone on the heaven stairway. However, a disciple with a firm mind but ordinary aptitude, after all, was not as good as Xianxia and Gong Sunling, who had excellent aptitude and a good will. Speaking of the cultivation world, there were really many people who were dedicated to cultivation, but there were only a few who stood out. Cultivation, after all, still had an advantage in aptitude. Su Qingxin had almost recovered in the past few days. The spiritual power that he had consumed, in his estimation, could be restored to its original state in a month at most. These few days were also the days that Su Qingxin was most proud of. Usually, it was the other sects who sent a few disciples who had ascended to the 30s, 40s, or 50s to show off in front of Su Qingxin. This time, it was finally Su Qingxin's turn to stand out. It was a pity that the other 9 Jiedan stage masters who presided over the battle with him were still healing. Their injuries were more than 10 times worse than Su Qingxin's. Even their cultivation level had dropped by 1 level. Originally, they were at Golden Core level 5, but now they had dropped to level 4. Although it was just a small level, it was not something that could be recovered in 10 days or half a month. At the Golden Core level, it would take at least 5 to 10 years to improve. The loss was so great that it was too late for these people to regret. If they had known earlier, they would not have followed that guy from the Tianquan sect to make things difficult for Yang Chen. How could a disciple of Qi training level 2 threaten them? They directly attacked Yang Chen's identity as an executioner, but they did not expect that it was not his weakness at all. On the contrary, it helped Yang Chen's reputation of reaching the top of the stairway to heaven. If they had known earlier, they might have followed the prescribed order and waited for Yang Chen to ascend a few levels before attacking his weakness. Maybe Yang Chen would not be able to reach the top at all. However, it was useless to regret now. They could only accept this fact. They suddenly dropped a level and were seriously injured, but they did not have to watch Su Qingxin swagger in front of them. They did not have to be angry. Perhaps this was a little compensation from God. The few Golden Core Grandmasters did not dare to say much, but it did not mean that others would not. Reaching the top of the stairway to heaven was such a glory. How could it be given to a disciple of Qi training level 2 with mediocre aptitude? Moreover, before this guy started cultivating, he was an executioner who killed countless people. His hands were stained with blood. Why did Su Qingxin from Chunyang Palace only lose his spiritual power, but the other 9 Golden Core Grandmasters' cultivation levels dropped? There were many people who were not convinced. Finally, after the experts from the surrounding sects arrived, someone raised an objection. Su Qingxin did not know why. He was only obediently controlling the situation. The other 9 Golden Core Grandmasters were too embarrassed to say what they were thinking. 9 Golden Core Grandmasters suppressing a Qi training level 2. If they said it out loud, it would not be suppressing Yang Chen, it would be adding glory to Yang Chen's face. Yang Chen from Chunyang Palace must be cheating. Someone raised a question, and immediately someone raised a bigger question. Cheng Wenkai, a Jedon stage master of the greatest heaven sect, after listening to the words of the younger generation of his sect, immediately came to a conclusion: this kind of person should be killed. Chapter 89. At any time, there was no shortage of jealous people, even in the cultivation world. After the Jindan stage master of Taishaman arrived, he raised this objection, and naturally, there were many responses. No one was willing to give the honor of climbing the heaven stairway to the top to a second-rate sect's disciple of Qi refining realm. Moreover, among the 10 Jindan stage masters who presided over the battle, except for Su Qingxin of Chunyang Palace, the others were all seriously injured and their realms had fallen. It would be strange if people did not doubt it. What? Cheating? Cheng Wenkai, show me how you cheat. Su Qingxin had been the head of the Foreign Affairs Hall for many years. Although he was tactful, he was not a timid person. When he heard that someone did not intend to admit that Yang Chen climbed the heaven stairway to the top, and even wanted to put Yang Chen to death, how could he be polite? Come on. You find 10 Jindan stage masters and send your Taishaman disciple up, and show me how you cheat. Although the heaven stairway ceremony was not an important thing, Su Qingxin had presided over it for many years, and he was furious at the moment. He grabbed the new Jindan stage master of Taishaman, Cheng Wenkai, and immediately asked for an explanation. Are all of you mute? Whether my Chunyang Palace disciple cheated or not, are you not clear? Do you dare to make a big heart oath and say that my Chunyang Palace disciple cheated? After the clamor, Su Qingxin immediately rushed his anger to the 10 Jindan stage masters who presided over the battle with him. These Jindan stage masters felt guilty, and naturally did not dare to face Su Qingxin's anger, let alone make a big heart oath. Avoiding Su Qingxin's angry eyes, the 9 Jindan stage masters were unspeakably embarrassed. Fellow Taoism Su, if you can let everyone know, how can it be called cheating? Cheng Wenkai just smiled slightly and immediately resolved the embarrassment of others, so that these guys whose realms had fallen also did not have to make a big hard oath. At most, according to Cheng Wenkai, they did not know how your Chunyang Palace cheated, so they did not know whether Yang Chen cheated or not. You. Su Qingxin didn't expect Cheng Wenkai to say that. As soon as he spoke, everyone began to suspect that Chunyang Palace was cheated by Su Qingxin and Yang Chen. No one could deny it. Even if they were forced to take out the truth, there was nothing they could do. They could just push it away, and they didn't know what method they would use. Indeed, Chunyang Palace was too weird this time. Among the disciples they sent, Gong Sunling was considered normal, a genius disciple at the 6th level of Lianqi realm. However, Yang Chen was merely a cultivator at the 2nd level of Qi training stage. He had probably just mastered the art of making talismans, yet he was able to kill Han Zhenda, a cultivator at the 6th level of weapon refining stage. Furthermore, it was not normal for a Qi training stage 2 disciple to participate in the stairway to heaven. Humph! Yang Chen, the disciple of Chunyang Palace, killed too many people before entering the sect. My evil spirit is too strong, and I am not afraid of any illusion. Climbing the sky ladder is not a big deal. Since things had come to this, Su Qingxin had no choice but to give his own reason. If this is considered cheating, then I have nothing to say. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't expect this to be the reason, especially the 9 golden core masters. When they heard this, they almost vomited blood. They had worked so hard to plan for half a day, targeting the weaknesses and working hard for the identity of the executioner, but the other party didn't care at all. No wonder they were injured. Once the illusion formation was broken, the person in charge of the formation would definitely suffer from the backlash. They had used so much spiritual energy to plot against Yang Chen, so the backlash would naturally be severe. Their cultivation level would drop, and in the end, they were the ones who attacked themselves. After the cause and effect, the 9 golden core masters were filled with regret, especially the 8 guys who worked together with the Tianquan sect. They regretted so much that their intestines turned green. They flirted with a person who wasn't afraid of the illusion for half a day, and even attacked themselves. Their internal organs were seriously injured, and their cultivation level dropped. How could they explain this? This is just what you said, fellow Su. It's just one person's words, it's not trustworthy. Cheng Wenkai smiled again. I think, if Chunyang Palace knows of any way to cheat in the heaven stairway, it's better to tell us so that we can discuss it together. Otherwise, such cheating will happen again in the future and become a laughingstock for no reason. Cheng Wenkai, are you determined to slander my disciple for cheating? Su Qingxin didn't like Cheng Wenkai, who always spoke slowly. He didn't even call him fellow Daoist, and called him by his name a few times. Chunyang Palace is considered a righteous sect, but they have such an unfilial disciple. I hope fellow Su won't cover up for him. Cheng Wenkai still had a smile on his face, but his mouth was accusing Yang Chen of cheating, and his words were full of sarcasm for Su Qingxin. So, Cheng Wenkai, you also suspect that I'm involved in cheating, right? Su Qingxin suppressed his anger and asked Cheng Wenkai angrily. Whether you're cheating or not, fellow Su, you know it in your heart. Cheng Wenkai smiled and replied. Su Qingxin was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at Cheng Wenkai for a while and couldn't say anything. Finally, he put on a serious face. Okay, I, Su Qingxin, hereby swear by my inner demon that if I cheated in Yang Chen's heaven stairway, I'll be struck by tribulation thunder and die without a burial place. After making the great oath of heart, Su Qingxin stared at Cheng Wenkai and asked, Cheng Wenkai, what do you say? Let's see how it goes. Cheng Wenkai looked innocent. If you didn't, then you didn't. Why do you need to make a great oath of heart? I believe fellow Su didn't cheat. Just that Yang Chen? Do you want him to make a great oath of heart as well? Su Qingxin asked with a sneer. He's a disciple at the second level of Qi training. It's hard to say whether he can build his foundation or not. The great oath of heart is still too far for him. Cheng Wenkai didn't want to let Yang Chen go at all. Maybe he found some kind of cheating method. I've never seen anyone in this world who isn't afraid of illusions. All in all, he was insisting that Yang Chen cheated. Fellow Su, don't be fooled by his performance. If fellow Su can't make up his mind to clean up the sect, I can do it for you. As for cleaning up the sect, let's wait until the next time someone from Taishanmen can reach the 50th level of heaven stage. Su Qingxin replied with a sneer. Everyone could tell that as long as a disciple from Taishanmen reached the 50th level of heaven stage in the future, Su Qingxin would definitely jump out and say that he cheated. As for fellow Qing, you suspect that my disciple from Chunyang Palace, Yang Chen, cheated. Why don't fellow Qing find 10 gold cores and let Yang Chen climb the heaven stairway again? Su Qingxin had confidence in Yang Chen and directly challenged him. He said, at that time, I believe fellow Qing will be convinced, right? Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.